Second Pada. Not that which is inferred, on account of the impossibility of construction, and on account of activity. The sutras have so far set forth the doctrine that the highest Brahman is the cause of the origination and so on of the world, and have refuted the objections raised by others. They now, in order to safeguard their own position, proceed to demolish the positions held by those very adversaries. For otherwise it might happen that some slow-witted persons, unaware of those other views resting on mere fallacious arguments, would imagine them possibly to be authoritative, and hence might be somewhat shaken in their belief in the Vedic doctrine. Another Pada therefore is begun to the express end of refuting the theories of others. The beginning is made with the theory of Kepler, because the theory has several features, such as the view of the existence of the effect in the cause, which are approved of by the followers of the Veda, and hence is more likely, than others, to give rise to the erroneous view of its being the true doctrine. The sutras have proved only that the Vedic texts do not set forth the Sankhya view, while the task of the present Pada is to demolish that view itself. The sutras cannot therefore be charged with needless reiteration. The outline of the Sankhya doctrine is as follows. There is the fundamental Prakriti, which is not an effect. There are the 7 effects of Prakriti, the Mahat and so on, and the 16 effects of those effects, and there is the soul, which is neither Prakriti nor effect. Such is the comprehensive statement of the principles. The entity called fundamental Prakriti is constituted by the 3 substances called sattva, ragas, and tamas, in a state of complete equipoise, none of the 3 being either in defect or in excess. The essential nature of those 3 consists respectively in pleasure, pain, and dullness. They have for their respective effects lightness and illumination, excitement and mobility, heaviness and obstruction. They are absolutely non-perceivable by means of the senses, and to be defined and distinguished through their effects only. Prakriti, consisting in the equipoise of sattva, ragas, and tamas, is one, itself non-sentient but subserving the enjoyment and final release of the many sentient beings, eternal, all-pervading, ever active, not the effect of anything, but the one general cause. There are 7 principles which are the effects of Prakriti and the causal substances of everything else. These 7 are the Mahat, the Ahankara, the subtle matter of sound, the subtle matter of touch, the subtle matter of color, the subtle matter of taste, and the subtle matter of smell. The Ahankara is threefold, being either modified, or active, or the originator of the elements. The Vaikarika is of sattva nature and the originator of the sense, organs. The Bhutadi is of tamas, nature, and the cause of those subtle matters which in their turn are the cause of the gross elements. The Taigasa is of the nature of ragas, and assists the other 2. The 5 gross elements are the ether and so on. The 5 intellectual senses are hearing and so on. The 5 organs of action are speech and so on. With the addition of the internal organ, these are the 16 entities which are mere effects. The soul, not being capable of any change, is not either the causal matter or the effect of anything. For the same reason it is without attributes, consisting of mere intelligence, eternal, non-active, all-pervading, and different in each body. Being incapable of change and non-active, it can neither be an agent nor an enjoyer. But although this is so, men in their confusion of mind, due to the closeness to each other of Prakriti and the soul, erroneously attribute to Prakriti the intelligence of the soul, and to the soul the activity of Prakriti, just as the redness of the rose superimposes itself on the crystal near it, and thus consider the soul to be an eye and an enjoyer. Fruition thus results from ignorance, and release from knowledge of the truth. This their theory the Sankhya's prove by means of perception, inference, and authoritative tradition. Now with regard to those matters which are proved by perception, we Vedantins have no very special reason for dissenting from the Sankhyas, and what they say about their authoritative tradition, claiming to be founded on the knowledge of all-knowing persons such as Kepler, has been pretty well disproved by us in the first ADHYÄYA. If, now, we further manage to refute the inference which leads them to assume the pradhana as the cause of the world, we shall have disestablished their whole theory. We therefore proceed to give this refutation. On this point the Sankhyas reason as follows. It must necessarily be admitted that the entire world has one cause only, for if effects were assumed to originate from several causes we should never arrive at an ultimate cause. Assume that parts such as threads produce a whole in the way of their being joined together by means of their 6 sides, which are parts of the threads. You must then further assume that the threads themselves are in the same way produced by their parts, having a similar constitution, and these parts again by their parts, until you reach the atoms. These also must be assumed to produce their immediate effects by being joined together with their 6 sides, for otherwise solid extension could not be brought about. And then the atoms also as being wholes, consisting of parts, must be viewed as produced by their parts, and these again by their parts and so on, so that we never arrive at an ultimate cause. In order therefore to establish such an ultimate cause we must have recourse to the hypothesis of the general cause being constituted by one substance, which possesses the power of transforming itself in various different ways, without at the same time forfeiting its own essential nature, and which forms the general substrate for an infinity of different effects, from the Mahat downwards. This one general cause is the pradhana constituted by the equipoise of the 3 gunas. The reasons for the assumption of this pradhana are as follows. On account of the limitedness of particular things, of connection, of activity proceeding from special power, and of the difference and non-difference of cause and effect, the non-evolved is the general cause of this many-natured universe. The term Vaisvarapya denotes that which possesses all forms, the entire world with its variously constituted parts, bodies, worlds, and so on. This world, which on account of its variegated constitution must be held to be an effect, has for its cause the unevolved, which is of the same nature as the world. Why so? Because it is an effect, for we perceive that every effect is different from its special cause, which has the same nature as the effect, and at the same time is non-different. Such effected things as a jar and a gold ornament are different from their causes, clay and gold, which have the same nature as the effects, and at the same time non-different. Hence the manifold-natured world originates from the pradhana which has the same nature, and is again merged in it. The world thus has the pradhana alone for its cause. This pradhana is constituted by the equipoise of the 3 gunas, and thus is a cause possessing a nature equal to that of its effect, the world, for the world is of the nature of pleasure, pain, and dullness, which consist of sattva, ragas, and tamas respectively. The case is analogous to that of a jar consisting of clay. Of that also the cause is none other than the substance clay, for in every case observation shows that only such causal substances as are of the same nature as the effects possess that power which is called the origination of the effect. That the general cause can be found only in the unevolved pradhana, which consists of the 3 gunas in a state of equipoise and is unlimited with regard to space as well as time, follows from the limitedness of the particular things, the mahat, the ahankara, and so on. These latter things are limited like jars and so on, and hence incapable of originating the entire world. Hence it follows that this world, consisting of the three gunas, has for its only cause the pradhana, which is constituted by those three gunas in a state of equipoise. Against this argumentation the sutra says, not that which is inferred, on account of the impossibility of construction, and on account of activity. Inference means that which is inferred, the pradhana. The pradhana postulated by you is not capable of constructing this manifold-natured world, because while itself being non-intelligent it is not guided by an intelligent being understanding its nature. Whatever is of this latter kind is incapable of producing effects, as wood and the like by themselves are not capable of constructing a palace or a carriage. As it is matter of observation that non-intelligent wood, not guided by an intelligent agent understanding its nature, cannot produce effects, and as it is observed that if guided by such an agent matter does enter on action so as to produce effects, the pradhana, which is not ruled by an intelligent agent, cannot be the general cause. The and in the sutra is meant to add as a further argument that presence has no proving force, for whiteness present in cows and so on is not invariably accompanied by the quality of being the cause of the class characteristics of cows. Nor must it be said that qualities such as whiteness, although present in the effect, may not indeed be causes, but that substances such as gold and the like which are present in certain effects are invariably accompanied by the quality of being causes, and that hence also the substances called sattva, ragas, and tamas, which are found present in all effects, are proved to be the causes of all those effects. For sattva and so on are attributes of substances, but not themselves substances. Sattva and so on are the causes of the lightness, light, belonging to substances such as earth and the like, and hence distinctive attributes of the essential nature of those substances, but they are not observed to be present in any effects in a substantial form, as clay, gold, and other substances are. It is for this reason that they are known as gunas. You have further said that the worlds having one cause only must be postulated in order that an ultimate cause may be reached. But as the sattva, ragas, and tamas are not one but three, you yourself do not assume one cause, and hence do not manage to arrive at an ultimate cause. For your pradhana consists in the equipoise of the three gunas. There are thus several causes, and you have no more an ultimate cause than others. Nor can you say that this end is accomplished through the three gunas being unlimited. For if the three gunas are all alike unlimited, and therefore omnipresent, there is nowhere a plus or minus of any of them. And as thus no inequality can result, effects cannot originate. In order to explain the origination of results it is therefore necessary to assume limitation of the gunas. Nor is our view confirmed by those cases only in which it is clearly perceived that matter produces effects only when guided by an intelligent principle. Other cases also are in favor of our view. This the next sutra declares. If it be said, like milk or water, there also. What has been said, the Sankhya rejoins, as to the impossibility of the pradhana not guided by an intelligent principle constructing this variously constituted world, is unfounded. For the pradhana may be supposed to act in the same way as milk and water do. Milk, when turning into sour milk, is capable of going by itself through a series of changes. It does not therefore depend on anything else. In the same way we observe that the homogeneous water discharged from the clouds spontaneously proceeds to transform itself into the various saps and juices of different plants, such as palm trees, mango trees, wood apple trees, lime trees, tamarind trees, and so on. In the same way the pradhana, of whose essential nature it is to change, may, without being guided by another agent, abide in the interval between two creations in a state of homogeneousness, and then when the time for creation comes modify itself into many various effects due to the loss of equilibrium on the part of the gunas, as has been said owing to modification, as water according to the difference of the abodes of the several gunas. In this way the unevolved acts independently of anything else. To this reasoning the sutra replies, there also, in the instances of milk and water, activity is not possible in the absence of an intelligent principle, for these very cases have already been referred to as proving our position. The sutra meant to prove only that a being destitute of other visible instruments of action is able to produce its own special effect, but not to disprove the view of all agency presupposing an intelligent principle. That even in water and so on an intelligent principle is present is proved by scriptural texts, he who dwells in water and so on, and because from the independence there would follow the non-existence of what is different. That the pradhana which is not guided by an intelligent principle is not the universal cause is proved also by the fact that, if we ascribe to it a power for change independent of the guidance of a Lord capable of realizing all his purposes, it would follow that the pralaya state, which is different from the state of creation, would not exist, while on the other hand the guidance of the pradhana by a Lord explains the alternating states of creation and pralaya as the effects of his purposes. Nor can the Sankhya retort that our view gives rise to similar difficulties in so far, namely, as the Lord, all whose wishes are eternally accomplished, who is free from all imperfection, cannot be the originator of either creation or pralaya, and as the creation of an unequal world would lay him open to the charge of mercilessness. For, as explained before, even a being perfect and complete may enter on activity for the sake of sport, and as the reason for a particular creation on the part of an all-knowing Lord may be his recognition of Prakriti having reached a certain special state, it is the deeds of the individual souls which bring about the inequalities in the new creation. But if this is so, all difference of states is caused exclusively by the good and evil deeds of the individual souls, and what position remains then for a ruling Lord, Prakriti, impressed by the good and evil deeds of the souls, will by herself modify herself on such lines as correspond to the deserts of the individual souls, in the same way as we observe that food and drink, if either vitiated by poison or reinforced by medicinal herbs and juices, enter into new states which render them the causes of either pleasure or pain. Hence all the differences between states of creation and pralaya, as also the inequalities among created beings such as gods, men, and so on. And finally the souls reaching the condition of release, may be credited to the pradhana, possessing as it does the capability of modifying itself into all possible forms. You do not, we reply, appear to know anything about the nature of good and evil works, for this is a matter to be learned from the Sastra. The Sastra is constituted by the aggregate of words called Veda, which is handed on by an endless unbroken succession of pupils learning from qualified teachers, and raised above all suspicion of imperfections such as spring from mistake and the like. It is the Veda which gives information as to good and evil deeds, the essence of which consists in their pleasing or displeasing the Supreme Person, and as to their results, pleasure and pain, which depend on the grace or wrath of the Lord. In agreement here with the Dharmadacharya says, from the wish of giving rise to fruits they seek to please the self with works, he being pleased is able to bestow fruits. This is the purport of the Sastra. Thus Sruti also says, sacrifices and pious works which are performed in many forms, all that he bears, be the navel of the universe. And in the same spirit the Lord himself declares, from whom there proceed all beings, by whom all this is pervaded. Worshipping him with the proper works man attains to perfection, and these evil and malign haters, lowest of men, I hurl perpetually into transmigrations and into demoniac wombs. The Divine Supreme Person, all whose wishes are eternally fulfilled, who is all-knowing and the ruler of all, whose every purpose is immediately realized, having engaged in sport befitting his might and greatness, and having settled that work is of a twofold nature, such and such works being good and such being evil, and having bestowed on all individual souls bodies and sense organs capacitating them for entering on such work and the power of ruling those bodies and organs, and having himself entered into those souls as their inner self abides within them, controlling them as an animating and cheering principle, the souls, on their side, endowed with all the powers imparted to them by the Lord and with bodies and organs bestowed by him, and forming abodes in which he dwells, apply themselves on their own part, and in accordance with their own wishes, to work either good or evil. The Lord, then, recognizing him who performs good actions as one who obeys his commands, blesses him with piety, riches, worldly pleasures, and final release, while him who transgresses his commands, he causes to experience the opposites of all these. There is thus no room whatever for objections founded on deficiency, on the Lord's part, of independence in his dealings with men, and the like. Nor can he be arraigned with being pitiless or merciless. For by pity we understand the inability, on somebody's part, to bear the pain of others, coupled with the disregard of his own advantage. When pity has the effect of bringing about the transgression of law on the part of the pitying person, it is in no way to his credit. It rather implies the charge of unmanliness, and it is creditable to control and subdue it. For otherwise it would follow that to subdue and chastise one's enemies is something to be blamed. What the Lord himself aims at is ever to increase happiness to the highest degree, and to this end it is instrumental that should reprove and reject the infinite and intolerable mass of sins which accumulates in the course of beginning and endless eons, and thus check the tendency on the part of individual beings to transgress his laws. For thus he says, to them ever devoted, worshipping me in love, I give that means of wisdom by which they attain to me. In mercy only to them, dwelling in their hearts, do I destroy the darkness born of ignorance with the brilliant light of knowledge. It thus remains a settled conclusion that the pradhana, which is not guided by an intelligent principle, cannot be the general cause. Here a further objection is raised. Although prakriti, as not being ruled by an intelligent principle, is not capable of that kind of activity which springs from effort, she may yet be capable of that kind of activity which consists in mere transformation. For we observe parallel cases. The grass and water which are consumed by a cow change on their own account into milk. In the same way, then, Prakriti may on her own account transform herself into the world. To this the next sutra replies, nor like grass and so on, because does not exist elsewhere. This argumentation does not hold good, for as grass and the like do not transform themselves without the guidance of an intelligent principle, your proving instance is not established. But why is it not established? Because it does not exist elsewhere. If grass, water and so on changed into milk even when consumed by a bull or when not consumed at all, then indeed it might be held that they change without the guidance of an intelligent principle. But nothing of the kind takes place, and hence we conclude that it is the intelligent principle only which turns the grass eaten by the cow into milk. The present sutra is meant to emphasize and particularize it, and if you say, as the man and the stone, thus also. Here the following view might be urged: although the soul consists of mere intelligence and is inactive, while the pradana is destitute of all power of thought, yet the non-sentient pradana may begin to act owing to the nearness of the soul. For we observe parallel instances. A man blind but capable of motion may act in some way, owing to the nearness to him of some lame man who has no power of motion but possesses good eyesight and assists the blind man with his intelligence. And through the nearness of the magnetic stone iron moves. In the same way the creation of the world may result from the connection of Prakriti and the soul, as has been said, in order that the soul may know the pradana and become isolated. The connection of the two takes place like that of the lame and the blind, and thence creation springs. This means, to the end that the soul may experience the pradana, and for the sake of the soul's emancipation, the pradana enters on action at the beginning of creation, owing to the nearness of the soul. To this the sutra replies thus also. This means, the inability of the pradana to act remains the same, in spite of these instances. The lame man is indeed incapable of walking, but he possesses various other powers. He can see the road and give instructions regarding it, and the blind man, being an intelligent being, understands those instructions and directs his steps accordingly. The magnet again possesses the attribute of moving towards the iron and so on. The soul on the other hand, which is absolutely inactive, is incapable of all such changes. As, moreover, the mere nearness of the soul to the pradana is something eternal, it would follow that the creation also is eternal. If, on the other hand, the soul is held to be eternally free, then there can be no bondage and no release. And on account of the impossibility of the relation of principal matter, you Sankhya's maintain that the origination of the world results from a certain relation between principal and subordinate entities which depends on the relative inferiority and superiority of the gunas, according to the difference of the abodes of the several gunas. But, as in the pralaya state the three gunas are in a state of equipoise, none of them being superior or inferior to the others, that relation of superiority and subordination cannot then exist, and hence the world cannot originate. Should it, on the other hand, be maintained that even in the pralaya state there is a certain inequality, it would follow therefrom that creation is eternal. And if another inference be made, on account of being destitute of the power of a knowing subject, even if the pradana were inferred by some reasoning different from the arguments so far refuted by us, our objections would remain in force because, anyhow, the pradana is devoid of the power of a cognizing subject. The pradana thus cannot be established by any mode of inference. And even if it be admitted, on account of the absence of a purpose, even if it were admitted that the pradana is established by inference, the Sankhya theory could not be accepted for the reason that the pradana is without a purpose. For, according to the view expressed in the passage, in order that the soul may know the pradana and become isolated, the purpose of the pradana is fruition and final release on the part of the soul, but both these are impossible. For, as the soul consists of pure intelligence, is inactive, changeless, and spotless, and hence eternally emancipated, it is capable neither of fruition which consists in consciousness of Prakriti, nor of release which consists in separation from Prakriti. If, on the other hand, it be held that the soul constituted as described is, owing to the nearness of Prakriti, capable of fruition, of being conscious of pleasure and pain, which are special modifications of Prakriti, it follows that, as Prakriti is ever near, the soul will never accomplish emancipation, and objectionable on account of the contradictions. The Sankhya system, moreover, labors from many internal contradictions. The Sankhyas hold that while Prakriti is for the sake of another and the object of knowledge and fruition, the soul is independent, an enjoying and knowing agent, and conscious of Prakriti, that the soul reaches isolation through the instrumentality of Prakriti only, and that as its nature is pure, permanent, unchanging consciousness, absence of all activity and isolation belong to that nature, that for this reason the accomplishing of the means of bondage and of release belong to Prakriti only, and that, owing to Prakriti's proximity to the unchanging non-active soul, Prakriti, by a process of mutual superimposition, works towards the creation of a world and subserves the purposes of the soul's fruition and emancipation. Since the aggregate of things is for the sake of another, since there is an opposite of the three gunas and the rest, since there is superintendence, since there is an experiencing subject, and since there is activity for the sake of isolation, the soul exists, and from that contrast the soul is proved to be a witness, isolated, neutral, cognizing and inactive, and after having stated that the activity of the pradhana is for the purpose of the release of the self, the text says, therefore no is either bound or released, nor does it migrate, it is Prakrit which, abiding in various beings, is bound and released and migrates, and from this connection therewith the non-intelligent appears as intelligent. And although all agency belongs to the gunas, the indifferent becomes an agent. In order that the soul may know the pradhana and become isolated, the connection of the two takes place like that of the lame and the blind, and thence creation springs. Now to that which is eternally unchanging, non-active and isolated, the attributes of being a witness and an enjoying and cognizing agent can in no way belong, nor also can such a being be subject to error resting on superimposition, for error and superimposition both are of the nature of change, and, on the other hand, they also cannot belong to Prakriti, since they are attributes of intelligent beings. For by superimposition we understand the attribution, on the part of an intelligent being, of the qualities of one thing to another thing, and this is the doing of an intelligent being, and moreover a change. Nor is it possible that superimposition and the like should take place in the soul only if it is in approximation to Prakriti. They may take place just on account of the non-changing nature of the soul. Then, we reply, they would take place permanently, and that mere proximity has no effective power. And if it is maintained that it is Prakriti only that migrates, is bound and released, how then can she be said to benefit the soul, which is eternally released? That she does so the Sankhyas distinctly assert, by manifold means Prakriti, helpful and endowed with the gunas, without any benefit to herself, accomplishes the purpose of the soul, which is thankless and not composed of the gunas. The Sankhyas further teach that Prakriti, on being seen by any soul in her true nature, at once retires from that soul, as a dancer having exhibited herself on the stage withdraws from the soul, so Prakriti withdraws from the soul when she has manifested herself to it. My opinion is that there exists nothing more sensitive than Prakriti, who knowing I have been seen does not again show itself to the soul. But this doctrine also is inappropriate. For, as the soul is eternally released and above all change, it never sees Prakriti, nor does it attribute to itself her qualities, and Prakriti herself does not see herself since she is of non-intelligent nature. Nor can she wrongly impute to herself the soul's seeing of itself as her own seeing of herself, for she herself is non-intelligent and the soul is incapable of that change which consists in seeing or knowing. Let it then be said that the seeing means nothing more than the proximity of Prakriti to the soul. But this also does not help you, for, as said above, from that there would follow eternal seeing, since the two are in eternal proximity. Moreover, the ever-unchanging soul is not capable of an approximation which does not form an element of its unchanging nature. Moreover, if you define the seeing as mere proximity and declare this to be the cause of release, we point out that it equally is the cause of bondage, so that bondage and release would both be permanent. Let it then be said that what causes bondage is wrong seeing, while intuition of the true nature of things is the cause of release. But as both these kinds of seeing are nothing but proximity, it would follow that both take place permanently. And if, on the other hand, the proximity of soul and Prakriti were held not to be permanent, then the cause of such proximity would have to be assigned, and again the cause of that, and so on ad infinitum. Let us then, to escape from these difficulties, define proximity as nothing more than the true nature of soul and Prakriti. As the true nature is permanent, we reply, it would follow therefrom that bondage and release would be alike permanent. On account of all these contradictory views, the system of the Sankhya's is untenable. We finally remark that the arguments here set forth by us at the same time prove the untenableness of the view of those who teach that there is an eternally unchanging Brahman whose nature is pure, non-differenced intelligence, and which by being conscious of nescience experiences unreal bondage and release. For those philosophers can show no more than the Sankhya's do how their Brahman can be conscious of nescience, can be subject to ADHYÄYA, and so on. There is, however, the following difference between the two theories. The Sankhya's, in order to account for the definite individual distribution of birth, death, and so on, assume a plurality of souls. The Vedantins, on the other hand, do not allow even so much, and their doctrine is thus all the more irrational. The assertion that there is a difference between the two doctrines, insofar as the Vedantins hold Prakriti to be something unreal, while the Sankhya's consider it to be real, is unfounded, for pure, homogeneous intelligence, eternally non-changing, cannot possibly be conscious of anything different from itself, whether it be unreal or real. And if that thing is held to be unreal, there arise further difficulties, owing to its having to be viewed as the object of knowledge, of refutation, and so on. Here terminates the adhikārana of the impossibility of construction, or in the same way as the big and long from the short and the atomic. We have shown that the theory of the pradhana being the universal cause is untenable, since it rests on fallacious arguments, and suffers from inner contradictions. We shall now prove that the view of atoms constituting the universal cause is untenable likewise, or in the same way as the big and long from the short and the atomic is untenable must be supplied from the preceding sutra, or has to be taken in the sense of and. The sense of the sutra is, in the same way as the big and long, as the theory of ternary compounds originating from the short and the atomic, from binary compounds and simple atoms is untenable, so everything else which they maintain is untenable, or, in other words, as the theory of the world originating from atoms through binary compounds is untenable, so everything else is likewise untenable. Things consisting of parts, as a piece of cloth, are produced by their parts, threads, being joined by means of the 6 sides which are parts of those parts. Analogously, the atoms also must be held to originate binary compounds in the way of combining by means of their 6 sides, for if the atoms possessed no distinction of parts, a group of even 1,000 atoms would not differ in extension from a single atom, and the different kinds of extension, minuteness, shortness, bigness, length, would never emerge. If, on the other hand, it is admitted that the atoms also have distinct sides, they have parts and are made up of those parts, and those parts again are made up of their parts, and so on in infinitum. But, the Vaishaka may object, the difference between a mustard seed and a mountain is due to the paucity of the constituent parts on the one hand, and their multitude on the other. If, now, it be held that the atom itself contains an infinity of parts, the mustard seed and the mountain alike will contain an infinity of parts, and thus their inequality cannot be accounted for. We must therefore assume that there is a limit of subdivision. Not so, we reply. If the atoms did not possess distinct parts, there could originate no extension greater than the extension of one atom, and thus neither mustard seed nor mountain would ever be brought about. But what, then, are we to do to get out of this dilemma? You have only to accept the Vedic doctrine of the origination of the world. Others explain the above sutra as meant to refute an objection against the doctrine of Brahman being the general cause, but this does not suit the arrangement of the sutras, and would imply a meaningless iteration. The objections raised by some against the doctrine of Brahman have been disposed of in the preceding Pada, and the present Pada is devoted to the refutation of other theories, and that the world admits of being viewed as springing from an intelligent principle such as Brahman. The sense of the sutra, therefore, is none other than what we stated above. But what are those other untenable views to which the sutra refers? To this question the next sutra replies, on both assumptions also there is no motion, and thence non-being. The atomic theory teaches that the world is produced by the successive formation of compounds, binary, ternary, and so on, due to the aggregation of atoms, such aggregation resulting from the motion of the atoms. The primary motion of the atoms, which are the cause of the origination of the entire world, is assumed to be brought about by the unseen principle, the upward flickering of fire, the sideway motion of air, the primary motion on the part of atoms and of the manas are caused by the unseen principle. Is then, we ask, this primary motion of the atoms caused by an adrishta residing in them, or by an adrishta residing in the souls? Neither alternative is possible. For the unseen principle which is originated by the good and evil deeds of the individual souls cannot possibly reside in the atoms, and if it could, the consequence would be that the atoms would constantly produce the world. Nor again can the adrishta residing in the souls be the cause of motion originating in the atoms. Let it then be assumed that motion originates in the atoms, owing to their being in contact with the souls in which the adrishta abides. If this were so, we reply, it would follow that the world would be permanently created, for the adrishta of the souls forms an eternal stream. But the adrishta requires to be matured in order to produce results. The adrishtas of some souls come to maturity in the same state of existence in which the deeds were performed. Others become mature in a subsequent state of existence only, and others again do not become mature before a new kalpa has begun. It is owing to this dependence on the maturation of the adrishtas that the origination of the world does not take place at all times. But this reasoning also we cannot admit, for there is nothing whatever to establish the conclusion that all the different adrishtas which spring from the manifold actions performed at different times, without any previous agreement, by the infinite multitude of individual selves should reach a state of uniform maturation at one and the same moment of time. Nor does this view of yours account for the fact of the entire world being destroyed at the same time, and remaining in a state of non-maturation for the period of adviparadika. Nor can you say that the motion of the atoms is due to their conjunction with adrishta possesses certain specific qualities imparted to them by the will of the Lord, for by mere inference the existence of a Lord cannot be proved. The origin of the world cannot, therefore, be due to any action on the part of the atoms, and because owing to the acknowledgement of samavaya, there results a regressus in infinitum from equality. The Vaishika doctrine is further untenable on account of the acknowledgement of samavaya. Why so? Because the samavaya also, like part, quality, and generic characteristics, requires something else to establish it, and that something else again requires some further thing to establish it, from which there arises an infinite regress. To explain, the Vaishikas assume the so-called samavaya relation, defining it as that connection which is the cause of the idea. This is here, in the case of things permanently and inseparably connected, and standing to each other in the relation of abode and thing abiding in the abode. Now, if such a samavaya relation is assumed in order to account for the fact that things observed to be inseparably connected, as class characteristics are inseparably connected with the individuals to which they belong, as such, inseparably connected, a reason has also to be searched for why the samavaya, which is of the same nature as those things, is such, and for that reason, again, a further reason has to be postulated, and so on, in infinitum. Nor can it be said that inseparable connection must be assumed to constitute the essential nature of samavaya, for on this reasoning you would have to assume the same essential nature for class characteristics, qualities, and so on. Nor is it a legitimate proceeding to postulate an unseen entity such as the samavaya is, and then to assume for it such and such an essential nature. These objections apply to the samavaya whether it be viewed as eternal or non-eternal. The next sutra urges a further objection against it if viewed as eternal, and because would thus be eternal. The samavaya is a relation, and if that relation is eternal, that to which the relation belongs must also be eternal, so that we would arrive at the unacceptable conclusion that the world is eternal. And on account of having color and so on, the reverse, as it is observed, from the view that the atoms of four kinds, of earth or water or fire or air, possess color, taste, smell, and touch, it would follow that the atoms are non-eternal, gross, and made up of parts. And this is the reverse of what the Vaishikas actually teach as to their atoms. That they are eternal, subtle, and not made up of parts. For things possessing color, jars, are non-eternal, because it is observed that they are produced from other causes of the same, non-eternal nature, and so on. To a non-perceived thing which is assumed in accordance with what is actually perceived, we may not ascribe any attributes that would be convenient to us, and it is in accordance with actual experience that you Vaishikas assume the atoms to possess color and other qualities. Hence your theory is untenable. Let it then, in order to avoid this difficulty, be assumed that the atoms do not possess color and other sensible qualities. To this alternative the next sutra refers, and as there are objections in both cases, a difficulty arises not only on the view of the atoms having color and other sensible qualities, but also on the view of their being destitute of those qualities, for as the qualities of affected things depend on the qualities of their causes, earth, water, and so on, would in that case be destitute of qualities. And if to avoid this difficulty, it be held that the atoms do possess qualities, we are again met by the difficulty stated in the preceding sutra. Objections thus arising in both cases, the theory of the atoms is untenable, and as it is not accepted, it is altogether disregarded. Kepler's doctrine, although to be rejected on account of its being in conflict with scripture and sound reasoning, yet recommends itself to the adherents of the Vedanta on some accounts, as its view of the existence of the effect in the cause. Kanada's theory, on the other hand, of which no part can be accepted and which is totally destitute of proof, cannot but be absolutely disregarded by all those who aim at the highest end of man. Here terminates the adhikirana of the big and long. Even on the aggregate with its two causes, there is non-establishment of that. We so far have refuted the Vaishikas, who hold the doctrine of atoms constituting the general cause. Now the followers of Buddha also teach that the world originates from atoms, and the sutras therefore proceed to declare that on their view also the origination, cause, and so on, of the world cannot rationally be accounted for. These Buddhas belong to four different classes. Some of them hold that all outward things, which are either elements or elemental, and all inward things which are either mind or mental, all these things consisting of aggregates of the atoms of earth, water, fire and air, are proved by means of perception as well as inference. Others hold that all external things, earth, and so on, are only to be inferred from ideas. Others again teach that the only reality are ideas to which no outward things correspond. The outward things are like the things seen in dreams. The three schools mentioned agree in holding that the things admitted by them have a momentary existence only, and do not allow that, in addition to the things mentioned, elements and elemental things, mind and mental things, there are certain further independent entities such as ether, self, and so on. Others finally assert a universal void, the non-reality of everything. The sutras at first dispose of the theory of those who acknowledge the real existence of external things. Their opinion is as follows: the atoms of earth which possess the qualities of color, taste, touch and smell, the atoms of water which possess the qualities of color, taste and touch, the atoms of fire which possess the qualities of color and touch, and the atoms of air which possess the quality of touch only, combine so as to constitute earth, water, fire and air, and out of the latter there originate the aggregates called bodies, sense organs, and objects of sense organs. And that flow of ideas, which assumes the form of the imagination of an apprehending agent abiding within the body, is what constitutes the so-called self. On the agencies enumerated there rests the entire empiric world. On this view the sutra remarks, even on the aggregate with its two causes, there is non-establishment of that aggregate which consists of earth and the other elements and of which the atoms are the cause, and that further aggregate which consists of bodies, sense organs and objects, and of which the elements are the cause. On neither of these two aggregates with their twofold causes can there be proved establishment of that, can the origination of that aggregate which we call the world be rationally established. If the atoms as well as earth and the other elements are held to have a momentary existence only, when, we ask, do the atoms, which perish within a moment, and the elements, move towards combination? And when do they combine? And when do they become the objects of states of consciousness? And when do they become the abodes of the activities of appropriation, avoidance and so on? And what is the cognizing self? And with what objects does it enter into contact through the sense organs? And which cognizing self cognizes which objects, and at what time? And which self proceeds to appropriate which objects, and at what time? For the sentient subject has perished, and the object of sensation has perished, and the cognizing subject has perished, and the object cognized has perished. And how can one subject cognize what has been apprehended through the senses of another? And how is one subject to take to itself what another subject has cognized? And should it be said that each stream of cognitions is one, yet this affords no sufficient basis for ordinary notions and activities of life, since the stream really is nothing different from the constituent parts of the stream. That in reality the ego constitutes the self and is the knowing subject, we have proved previously. If it be said that is to be explained through successive causality, we say no, on account of their not being the causes of aggregation. If it be said that through the successive causality of nescience and so on, the formation of aggregates and other matters may be satisfactorily accounted for. To explain, although all the entities have a merely momentary existence, yet all that is accounted for by avidya. Avidya means that conception, contrary to reality, by which permanency, and so on, are ascribed to what is momentary, and so on. Through avidya there are originated desire, aversion, which are comprised under the general term impression, and from those there springs cognition, which consists in the kindling of mind. From that mind and what is of the nature of mind and the substances possessing color, and so on. Earth, water, from that again the 6 sense organs, called the 6 abodes, from that the body, called touch, from that sensation, and so on, and from that again avidya, and the whole series is described, so that there is an endlessly revolving cycle, in which avidya, and so on, are in turn the causes of the links succeeding them. Now all this is not possible without those aggregates of the elements and elemental things which are called earth, and so on, and thereby the rationality of the formation of those aggregates is proved. To this the second half of the sutra replies not so, on account of not being the causes of aggregation. This cannot rationally be assumed, because avidya, and so on, cannot be operative causes with regard to the aggregation of earth and the other elements and elemental things. For avidya, which consists in the view of permanency and so on, belonging to what is non-permanent, and desire, aversion and the rest, which are originated by avidya, cannot constitute the causes of momentary things entering into aggregation. Not any more than the mistaken idea of shell silver is the cause of the aggregation of things such as shells. Moreover, on the border doctrine, he who views a momentary thing as permanent himself perishes at the same moment, who then is the subject in whom the so-called samskaras, desire, aversion, and so on, originate. Those who do not acknowledge one permanent substance constituting the abode of the samskaras have no right to assume the continuance of the samskaras, and on account of the cessation of the preceding one on the origination of the subsequent one. For the following reason also the origination of the world cannot be accounted for on the view of the momentariness of all existence. At the time when the subsequent momentary existence originates, the preceding momentary existence has passed away, and it cannot therefore stand in a causal relation towards the subsequent one. For if non-existence had causal power, anything might originate at any time at any place. Let it then be said that what constitutes a cause is nothing else but existence in a previous moment. But, if this were so, the previous momentary existence of a jar, let us say, would be the cause of all things whatever that would be met within this threefold world in the subsequent moment: cows, buffaloes, horses, chairs, stones. Let us then say that a thing existing in a previous moment is the cause only of those things, existing in the subsequent moment, which belong to the same species. But from this again it would follow that one jar existing in the previous moment will be the cause of all jars, to be met within any place, existing in the following moment. Perhaps you mean to say that one thing is the cause of one subsequent thing only. But how then are we to know which thing is the cause of which one subsequent thing? Well then I say that the momentarily existing jar which exists in a certain place is the cause of that one subsequent momentary jar only which exists at the very same place. Very good. Then you hold that a place is something permanent. Moreover, as, on your theory, the thing which has entered into contact with the eye or some other sense organ does no longer exist at the time when the idea originates, nothing can ever be the object of a cognition. The not being, there results contradiction of the admitted principle. Otherwise simultaneousness. If it be said that the effect may originate even when a cause does not exist, then, as we have pointed out before, anything might originate anywhere and at any time. And not only would the origination of the effect thus remain unexplained, but an admitted principle would also be contradicted. For you hold the principle that there are four causes bringing about the origination of a cognition. The Adipati cause, the Sahakari cause, the Alambana cause, and the Samanantara cause. The term Adipati denotes the sense organs, and if, in order to avoid opposition to an acknowledged principle, it be assumed that the origination of a further momentary jar takes place at the time when the previous momentary jar still exists, then it would follow that the two momentary jars, the causal one and the affected one, would be perceived together, but as a matter of fact they are not so perceived. And, further, the doctrine of general momentariness would thus be given up. And should it be said that momentariness remains, it would follow that the connection of the sense organ with the object and the cognition are simultaneous. There is non-establishment of Pratisankhaya and Aparatasankhaya destruction, on account of non-interruption. So far the hypothesis of origination from that which is not has been refuted. The present sutra now goes on to declare that also the absolute destruction of that which is cannot rationally be demonstrated. Those who maintain the momentariness of all things teach that there are two kinds of destruction, one of a gross kind, which consists in the termination of a series of similar momentary existences, and is capable of being perceived as immediately resulting from agencies such as the blow of a hammer, and the other of a subtle kind, not capable of being perceived, and taking place in a series of similar momentary existences at every moment. The former is called Pratisankhaya destruction, the latter Aparatasankhaya destruction. Both these kinds of destruction are not possible. Why? On account of the non-interruption, on account of the impossibility of the complete destruction of that which is. The impossibility of such destruction was proved by us, where we showed that origination and destruction mean only the assumption of new states on the part of one and the same permanent substance, and therefrom proved the non-difference of the effect from the cause. Here it may possibly be objected that as we see that a light when extinguished passes away absolutely, such absolute destruction may be inferred in other cases also. But against this we point out that in the case of a vessel of clay being smashed we perceive that the material, clay, continues to exist, and that therefrom destruction is ascertained to be nothing else but the passing over of a real substance into another state. The higher presumption, therefore, is that the extinguished light also has passed over into a different state, and that in that state it is no longer perceptible may be explained by that state being an extremely subtle one. And on account of the objections presenting themselves in either case, it has been shown that neither origination from nothing, as held by the advocates of general momentariness, is possible, nor the passing away into nothing on the part of the thing originated. The acknowledgment of either of these views gives rise to difficulties. If the effect originates from nothing, it is itself of the nature of nothing, for it is observed that effects share the nature of what they originate from. Pictures and ornaments, which are produced from clay and gold respectively, possess the nature of their causal substances. But you hold yourself that the world is not seen to be of the nature of nothingness, and certainly it is not observed to be so. Again, if that which is underwent absolute destruction, it would follow that after one moment the entire world would pass away into nothingness, and subsequently the world again originating from nothingness. It would follow that, as shown above, it would itself be of the nature of nothingness. There being thus difficulties on both views, origination and destruction cannot take place as described by you. And in the case of space also, on account of there being no difference, in order to prove the permanency of external and internal things, we have disproved the view that the two forms of destruction called pratisankhaya and apratisankhaya mean reduction of an existing thing to nothing. This gives us an opportunity to disprove the view of ether being likewise a mere irrational non-entity, as the Borders hold it to be. Ether cannot be held to be a mere irrational non-entity, because, like those things which are admitted to be positive existences, earth, and so on, it is proved by consciousness, not invalidated by any means of proof. For the formation of immediate judgments such as here are hawkflies, and there a vulture, implies our being conscious of ether as marking the different places of the flight of the different birds. Nor is it possible to hold that space is nothing else but the non-existence of earth, and so on, for this view collapses as soon as set forth in definite alternatives, for whether we define space as the antecedent and subsequent non-existence of earth, and so on, or as their mutual non-existence, or as their absolute non-existence, on none of these alternatives we attain the proper idea of space. If, in the first place, we define it as the antecedent and subsequent non-existence of earth, and so on, it will follow that, as the idea of space can thus not be connected with earth and other things existing at the present moment, the whole world is without space. If, in the second place, we define it as the mutual non-existence of earth, and so on, it will follow that, as such mutual non-existence inheres in the things only which stand towards each other in the relation of mutual non-existence, there is no perception of space in the intervals between those things. And, in the third place, absolute non-existence of earth, and so on, cannot of course be admitted. And as non-existence is clearly conceived as a special state of something actually existing, space, even if admitted to be of the nature of a bhava, would not on that account be a futile non-entity. And on account of recognition, we return to the proof of the, previously mooted, permanence of things. The anusmriti of the sutra means cognition of what was previously perceived, recognition. It is a fact that all things which were perceived in the past may be recognized, such recognition expressing itself in the form "this is just that." Nor must you say that this is a mere erroneous assumption of oneness due to the fact of the thing now perceived being similar to the thing perceived before, as in the case of the flame, for you do not admit that there is one permanent knowing subject that could have that erroneous idea. What one person has perceived, another cannot judge to be the same as, or similar to, what he is perceiving himself. If therefore you hold that there is an erroneous idea of oneness due to the perception of similarity residing in different things perceived at different times, you necessarily must acknowledge oneness on the part of the cognizing subject. In the case of the flame there is a valid means of knowledge to prove that there really is a succession of similar flames, but in the case of the jar, we are not aware of such a means, and we therefore have no right to assume that recognition is due to the similarity of many successive jars. Perhaps you will here argue as follows. The momentariness of jars and the like is proved by perception as well as inference. Perception in the first place presents as its object the present thing, which is different from non-present things, in the same way as it presents the blue thing as different from the yellow. It is in this way that we know the difference of the present thing from the past and the future. Inference again proceeds as follows. Jars and the like are momentary because they produce effects and have existence. What is non-momentary, such as the horn of a hare, does not produce effects and does not possess existence. We therefore conclude from the existence of the last momentary jar that the preceding jar existences also are perishable, just because they are momentary existences like the existence of the last jar. But both this perception and this inference have already been disproved by what was said above about the impossibility of momentary existences standing to one another in the relation of cause and effect. Moreover, that difference of the present object from the non-present object which is intimated by perception does not prove the present object to be a different thing, but merely its being connected with the present time. This does not prove it to be a different thing, for the same thing can be connected with different times. The two reasons again which were said to prove the momentariness of jars are invalid because they may be made to prove just the contrary of what they are alleged to prove. For we may argue as follows. From existence and from their having effects it follows that jars, and so on, are permanent, for whatever is non-permanent, is non-existent, and does not produce effects, as the horn of a hare. The capacity or producing effects can in fact be used only to prove non-momentariness on the part of jars, and so on, for as things perishing within a moment are not capable of acting, they are not capable of producing effects. Further, as it is seen in the case of the last momentary existence that its destruction is due to a visible cause, the proper conclusion is that also the other momentary jars require visible causes for their destruction, and jar is permanent and continuous up to the time when a destructive cause, such as the blow of a hammer, supervenes. Nor can it be said that hammers and the like are not the causes of destruction, but only the causes of the origination of a new series of momentary existences dissimilar to the former ones, in the case of the jar, of a series of momentary fragments of a jar, for we have proved before that the destruction of jars, and so on, means nothing but their passing over into a different condition, that of fragments. And even if destruction were held to be something different from the origination of fragments, it would yet be reasonable to infer, on the ground of immediate succession in time, that the cause of the destruction is the blow of the hammer. Hence it is impossible to deny in any way the permanency of things as proved by the fact of recognition. He who maintains that recognition which has for its object the oneness of a thing connected with successive points of time has for its objects different things, might as well say that several cognitions of, let us say, blue color have for their object something different from blue color. Moreover, for him who maintains the momentariness of the cognizing subject and of the objects of cognition, it would be difficult indeed to admit the fact of inference which presupposes the ascertainment and remembrance of general propositions. He would in fact not be able to set forth the reason required to prove his assertion that things are momentary, for the speaker perishes in the very moment when he states the proposition to be proved, and another person is unable to complete what has been begun by another and about which he himself does not know anything. Not from nonentity, this not being observed. So far we have set forth the arguments refuting the views of the Vaibhashikas as well as the Sautrantikas, both which schools maintain the reality of external things. Now the Sautrantika comes forward and opposes one of the arguments set forth by us above, that, on the view of general momentariness. Nothing can ever become an object of cognition, since the thing which enters into connection with the sense organ is no longer in existence when the cognition originates. It is not, he says, the persistence of the thing up to the time of cognition which is the cause of its becoming an object of cognition. To be an object of cognition means nothing more than to be the cause of the origination of cognition. Nor does this definition imply that the sense organs also are the objects of cognition, for a cause of cognition is held to be an object of cognition only insofar as it imparts to the cognition its own form. Now even a thing that has perished may have imparted its form to the cognition, and on the basis of that form, blue color, and so on, the thing itself is inferred. Nor can it be said that the form of subsequent cognitions is due to the action of previous cognitions, for on this hypothesis it could not be explained how in the midst of a series of cognitions of blue color there all at once arises the cognition of yellow color. The manifold character of cognitions must therefore be held to be due to the manifold character of real thing. To this we reply not from non-entity, this not being observed. The special forms of cognition, such as blue color, and so on, cannot be the forms of things that have perished, and therefore are not in being, since this is not observed. For it is not observed that when a substrate of attributes has perished, its attributes pass over into another thing. Reflections also are only of persisting things, not of mere attributes. We therefore conclude that the manifoldness of cognitions can result from the manifoldness of things only on the condition of the thing persisting at the time of cognition. The sutras now set forth a further objection which applies to both schools, and thus there would be accomplishment on the part of non-active people also. Thus, on the theory of universal momentariness, origination from the non-existent, causeless cognition, and so on, it would follow that persons also not making any efforts may accomplish all their ends. It is a fact that the attainment of things desired and the warding off of things not desired is effected through effort, and so on. But if all existences momentarily perish, a previously existing thing, or special attributes of it, such as after-effects or knowledge do not persist, and hence nothing whatever can be accomplished by effort. And as thus all effects would be accomplished without a cause, even perfectly inert men would accomplish all the ends to be reached in this and in the next life, including final release. Here terminates the adhikarana of the aggregates, not non-existence, on account of consciousness. Here now come forward the Yogacaras, who hold that cognitions only are real. There is no reasonable ground, they say, for the view that the manifoldness of ideas is due to the manifoldness of things, since ideas themselves, no less than the things assumed by others, have their distinct forms, and hence are manifold. And this manifold nature of ideas is sufficiently explained by so-called vasana. Vasana means a flow of ideas of different character. We observe that a cognition which has the form of a jar gives rise to the cognition of the two halves of a jar, and is itself preceded and produced by the cognition of a jar, and this again by a similar cognition, and so on. This is what we call a stream or flow of ideas. But how, then, is it that internal cognitions have the forms of external things, mustard grains, mountains, and so on? Even if real things are admitted, the Yogacara replies, their becoming objects of thought and speech depends altogether on the light of knowledge. For otherwise it would follow that there is no difference between the objects known by oneself and those known by others, and that cognitions thus shining forth to consciousness have forms must needs be admitted, for if they were without form they could not shine forth. Now we are conscious only of one such form, that of the cognition, that this form at the same time appears to us as something external is due to error. From the general law that we are conscious of ideas and things together only, it follows that the thing is not something different from the idea. As, moreover, the fact of one idea specially representing one particular thing only, whether it be a jar or a piece of cloth or anything else, requires for its explanation an equality in character of the idea and the thing. Those also who hold the existence of external things must needs assume that the idea has a form similar to that of the thing, and as this suffices for rendering possible practical thought and intercourse, there is nothing authorizing us to assume the existence of things in addition to the ideas. Hence cognitions only constitute reality, external things do not exist. To this the sutra replies, not non-existence, on account of consciousness. The non-existence of things, apart from ideas, cannot be maintained, because we are conscious of cognitions as what renders the knowing subject capable of thought and intercourse with regard to particular things. For the consciousness of all men taking part in worldly life expresses itself in forms such as I know the jar. Knowledge of this kind, as everybody's consciousness will testify, presents itself directly as belonging to a knowing subject and referring to an object. Those therefore who attempt to prove, on the basis of this very knowledge, that reality is constituted by mere knowledge, are fit subjects for general derision. This point has already been set forth in detail in our refutation of those crypto-boarders who take shelter under a pretended Vedic theory. To maintain, as the Yogacaras do, that the general rule of idea and thing presenting themselves together proves the non-difference of the thing from the idea, implies a self-contradiction, for going together can only be where there are different things. To hold that it is a general rule that of the idea, the essential nature of which is to make the thing to which it refers capable of entering into common thought and intercourse, we are always conscious together with the thing, and then to prove therefrom that the thing is not different from the idea, is a laughable proceeding indeed. And as, according to you, cognitions perish absolutely, and do not possess any permanently persisting aspect, it is rather difficult to prove that such cognitions form a series in which each member colors or affects the next one, for how is the earlier cognition, which has absolutely perished, to affect the later one, which has not yet arisen? We conclude therefore that the manifoldness of cognitions is due solely to the manifoldness of things. We are directly conscious of cognitions as rendering the things to which they refer capable of being dealt with by ordinary thought and speech, and the specific character of each cognition thus depends on the relation which connects it with a particular thing. This relation is of the nature of conjunction, since knowledge also is a substance. Just as light, although a substance, stands to the lamp in the relation of an attribute, so knowledge stands in the relation of an attribute to the self, but, viewed in itself, it is a substance. From all this it follows that external things are not non-existent. The next sutra refutes the opinion of those who attempt to prove the baselessness of the cognitions of the waking state by comparing them to the cognitions of a dreaming person. And on account of difference of nature not like dreams, owing to the different nature of dream cognitions, it cannot be said that, like them, the cognitions of the waking state also have no things to correspond to them, for dream cognitions are originated by organs impaired by certain defects, such as drowsiness, and are moreover sublated by the cognitions of the waking state, while the cognitions of the waking state are of a contrary nature. There is thus no equality between the two sets. Moreover, if all cognitions are empty of real content, You are unable to prove what you wish to prove, since your inferential cognition also is devoid of true content. If, on the other hand, it be held to have a real content, then it follows that no cognition is devoid of such content, for all of them are alike cognitions, just like the inferential cognition. The existence not, on account of the absence of perception. The existence of mere cognitions devoid of corresponding things is not possible, because such are nowhere perceived, for we nowhere perceive cognitions not inherent in a cognizing subject and not referring to objects. That even dream cognitions are not devoid of real matter we have explained in the discussion of the different kyatis. Here terminates the adhikārana of perception, and on account of its being unproved in every way. Here now come forward the Madhyamikas, who teach that there is nothing but a universal void. This theory of a universal nothing is the real purport of Sugata's doctrine, the theories of the momentariness of all existence, which imply the acknowledgement of the reality of things, were set forth by him merely as suiting the limited intellectual capacities of his pupils. Neither cognitions nor external objects have real existence, the void only constitutes reality, and final release means passing over into non-being. This is the real view of Buddha, and its truth is proved by the following considerations. As the nothing is not to be proved by any argument, it is self-proved, for a cause has to be assigned for that only which is. But what is does not originate either from that which is or that which is not. We never observe that which is to originate from being, for things such as jars, and so on, do not originate as long as the lump of clay is non-destroyed. Nor can being originate from non-being, for if the jar were supposed to originate from non-being, that non-being which results from the destruction of the lump of clay, it would itself be of the nature of non-being. Similarly, it can be shown that nothing can originate either from itself or from anything else. For the former hypothesis would imply the vicious procedure of the explanation presupposing the thing to be explained, and moreover no motive can be assigned for a thing originating from itself, and on the hypothesis of things originating from other things, it would follow that anything might originate from anything, for all things alike are other things. And as thus there is no origination, there is also no destruction. Hence the nothing constitutes reality, origination, destruction, being, non-being, and so on, are mere illusions. Nor must it be said that as even an illusion cannot take place without a substrate, we must assume something real to serve as a substrate, for in the same way as an illusion may arise even when the defect, the abode of the defect, and the knowing subject are unreal, it also may arise even when the substrate of the illusion is unreal. Hence the nothing is the only reality. To this the sutra replies, and on account of its being in every way unproved, the theory of general nothingness which you hold cannot stand. Do you hold that everything is being or non-being, or anything else? On none of these views the nothingness maintained by you can be established. For the terms being and non-being and the ideas expressed ly them are generally understood to refer to particular states of actually existing things only. If therefore you declare everything is nothing, your declaration is equivalent to the declaration, everything is being. For your statement also can only mean that everything that exists is capable of abiding in a certain condition. The absolute nothingness you have in mind cannot thus be established in any way. Moreover, he who tries to establish the tenet of universal nothingness can attempt this in so far only as, through some means of knowledge, he has come to know nothingness, and he must therefore acknowledge the truth of that means. For if it were not true, it would follow that everything is real. The view of general nothingness is thus altogether incapable of proof. Here terminates the adhikārana of unprovedness in every way. Not so, on account of the impossibility in one. The borders have been refuted. As now the gainers also hold the view of the world originating from atoms and similar views, their theory is reviewed next. The gainers hold that the world comprises souls, and non-souls, and that there is no Lord. The world further comprises 6 substances: souls, merit, demerit, bodies, time, and space. The souls are of 3 different kinds: bound, perfected by yoga, and released. Merit is that particular world-pervading substance which is the cause of the motion of all things moving. Demerit is that all-pervading substance which is the cause of stationariness. Body is that substance which possesses color, smell, taste, and touch. It is of 2 kinds: atomic or compounded of atoms. To the latter kind belong wind, fire, water, earth, the bodies of living creatures, and so on. Time is a particular atomic substance which is the cause of the current distinction of past, present, and future. Space is one, and of infinite extent. From among these substances those which are not atomic are comprehended under the term the 5 astikayas apostrophe, the astikaya of souls, the astikaya of merit, the astikaya of demerit, the astikaya of matter, the astikaya of space. This term astikaya is applied to substances occupying several parts or space. They also use another division of categories which subserves the purpose of release, distinguishing souls, non-souls, influx, bondage, nagara, samvara, and release. Release comprises the means of release also: perfect knowledge, good conduct, and so on. The soul is that which has knowledge, seeing, pleasure, strength for its qualities. Non-soul is the aggregate of the things enjoyed by the souls. Influx is whatever is instrumental towards the souls having the fruition of objects, the sense organs, and so on. Bondage is of 8 different kinds, comprising the 4 gati karman, and the 4 agati karman. The former term denotes whatever obstructs the essential qualities of the soul: knowledge, intuition, strength, pleasure. The latter whatever causes pleasure, pain, and indifference, which are due to the persistence of the wrong imagination that makes the soul identify itself with its body. Decay means the austerities, known from the teaching of the Arhat, which are the means of release. Samvara is such deep meditation as stops the action of the sense organs. Release, finally, is the manifestation of the self in its essential nature, free from all afflictions such as passion, and so on. The atoms, which are the causes of earth and the other compounds, are not, as the Vaishikas and others hold, of 4 different kinds, but have all the same nature. The distinctive qualities of earth, and so on, are due to a modification of the atoms. The gainers further hold that the whole complex of things is of an ambiguous nature insofar as being existent and non-existent, permanent and non-permanent, separate and non-separate. To prove this they apply their so-called saptabhanginaya: may be, it is, may be, it is not, may be, it is and is not, may be, it is not predicable, may be, it is and is not predicable, may be, it is not, and is not predicable, may be, it is and is not predicable. With the help of this they prove that all things, which they declare to consist of substance, and pariyaya, to be existing, one and permanent in so far as they are substances, and the opposite in so far as they are pariyayas. By pariyaya they understand the particular states of substances, and as those are of the nature of being as well as non-being, they manage to prove existence, non-existence, and so on. With regard to this the sutra remarks that no such proof is possible, not so, on account of the impossibility in one. because contradictory attributes such as existence and non-existence cannot at the same time belong to one thing, not any more than light and darkness, as a substance and particular states qualifying it, and, called pariya, are different things. One substance cannot be connected with opposite attributes. It is thus not possible that a substance qualified by one particular state, such as existence, should at the same time be qualified by the opposite state, non-existence. The non-permanency, further, of a substance consists in its being the abode of those particular states which are called origination and destruction. How then should permanency, which is of an opposite nature, reside in the substance at the same time? Difference again consists in things being the abodes of contradictory attributes. Non-difference, which is the opposite of this, cannot hence possibly reside in the same things which are the abode of difference, not any more than the generic character of a horse and that of a buffalo can belong to one animal. We have explained this matter at length, when, refuting the VEDÂNTA theory, time we are conscious of only as an attribute of substances, and the question as to its being and non-being, and so on, does not therefore call for a separate discussion. To speak of time as being and non-being in no way differs from generic characteristics, and so on, being spoken of in the same way, for, as we have explained before, of Gati and the like we are conscious only as attributes of substances. But, how can you maintain that Brahman, although one only, yet at the same time is the self of all? Because, we reply, the whole aggregate of sentient and non-sentient beings constitutes the body of the Supreme Person, omniscient, omnipotent, and so on. And that the body and the person embodied and their respective attributes are of totally different nature, we have explained likewise. Moreover, as your 6 substances, soul, and so on, and not one substance and one pariya, there being one substance, and so on, cannot be used to prove there being one and also not one, and so on. And if it should be said that those 6 substances are such, each owing to its own pariya and its own nature, we remark that then you cannot avoid contradicting your own theory of everything being of an ambiguous nature. Things which stand to each other in the relation of mutual non-existence cannot after all be identical. Hence the theory of the, and the permanency of both. There is no difference. The final size of the soul, the size it is in the state of release, is enduring since the soul does not subsequently pass into another body, and both, the soul in the state of release and the size of that soul, are permanent. From this it follows that that ultimate size is the true essential size of the soul and also belongs to it previously to release. Hence there is no difference of sizes, and the soul cannot therefore have the size of its temporary bodies. The Arhata theory is therefore untenable. Here terminates the adhikārana of the impossibility in one of the Lord, on account of inappropriateness. So far it has been shown that the doctrines of Kapila, Kannada, Shugata, and the Arhat must be disregarded by men desirous of final beatitude, for those doctrines are all alike untenable and foreign to the Veda. The Sutras now declare that, for the same reasons, the doctrine of Pasupati also has to be disregarded. The adherents of this view belong to 4 different classes: Kapilas, Kalamakas, Pasupatas, and Saivas. All of them hold fanciful theories of reality which are in conflict with the Veda, and invent various means for attaining happiness in this life and the next. They maintain the general material cause and the operative cause to be distinct, and the latter cause to be constituted by Pasupati. They further hold the wearing of the 6 so-called mudra badges and the like to be means to accomplish the highest end of man. Thus the Kapilas say, he who knows the true nature of the 6 mudras, who understands the highest mudra, meditating on himself as in the position called Bhagasana, reaches nirvana. The necklace, the golden ornament, the earring, the head jewel, ashes, and the sacred thread are called the 6 mudras. He whose body is marked with these is not born here again. Similarly, the Kalamakas teach that the means for obtaining all desired results in this world as well as the next are constituted by certain practices, such as using a skull as a drinking vessel, smearing oneself with the ashes of a dead body, eating the flesh of such a body, carrying a heavy stick, setting up a liquor jar and using it as a platform for making offerings to the gods, and the like. A bracelet made of rudraksha seeds on the arm, matted hair on the head, a skull, smearing oneself with ashes, apostrophe. All this is well known from the sacred writings of the Saivas. They also hold that by some special ceremonial performance men of different castes may become brahmanas and reach the highest asrama. By merely entering on the initiatory ceremony a man becomes a brahmana at once. By undertaking the Kapila rite a man becomes at once an ascetic. With regard to these views the sutra says of party, on account of inappropriateness, and not as here to be supplied from Sutra 32, the system of Pasupati has to be disregarded because it is inappropriate, because the different views and practices referred to are opposed to one another and in conflict with the Veda. The different practices enumerated above, the wearing of the 6 mudras and so on, are opposed to each other, and moreover the theoretical assumptions of those people, their forms of devotion and their practices, are in conflict with the Veda. For the Veda declares that Narayana, who is the highest Brahman, is alone the operative and the substantial cause of the world. Narayana is the highest Brahman, Narayana is the highest reality, Narayana is the highest light, Narayana is the highest self. That thought, may I be many, may I grow forth, he desired, may I be many, may I grow forth, and so on. In the same way the texts declare meditation on the Supreme Person, who is the highest Brahman, to be the only meditation which effects final release. I know that great person of sun-like luster beyond the darkness. A man who knows him passes over death. There is no other path to go. And in the same way all texts agree in declaring that the works subserving the knowledge of Brahman are only those sacrificial and other works which the Veda enjoins on men in the different castes and stages of life. Him Brahmanas seek to know by the study of the Veda, by sacrifice, by gifts, by penance, by fasting. Wishing for that world only, mendicants wander forth from their homes. In some texts enjoining devout meditation, and so on, we indeed meet with terms such as Prajapati, Shiva, Indra, Akasa, Prana, but that these all refer to the supreme reality established by the texts concerning Narayana, the aim of which texts it is to set forth the highest reality in its purity. In the same way we have proved that in texts treating of the creation of the world, such as being only this was in the beginning, and the like, the words being, Brahman, and so on, denote nobody else but Narayana, who is set forth as the universal creator in the account of creation given in the text. Alone indeed there was Narayana, not Brahma, not Asana. He being alone did not rejoice. As the Pasupati theory thus teaches principles, meditations and acts conflicting with the Veda, it must be disregarded. And on account of the impossibility of rulership, those who stand outside the Veda arrive through inference at the conclusion that the Lord is a mere operative cause. This being so, they must prove the Lord's being the ruler on the basis of observation. But it is impossible to prove that the Lord is the ruler of the pradhana in the same way as the potter is the ruler of the clay, for the Lord is without a body, while the power of ruling material causes is observed only in the case of embodied beings such as potters. Nor may you have recourse to the hypothesis of the Lord being embodied, for there arise difficulties whether that body, which as body must consist of parts, be viewed as eternal or as non-eternal. If you say, as in the case of the organs, we deny this, on account of enjoyment and so on, it may possibly be said that, in the same way as the enjoying soul, although in itself without a body, is seen to rule the sense organs, the body, and so on, the great Lord also, although without a body, may rule the pradana. But this analogy cannot be allowed on account of enjoyment, and so on. The body's being ruled by the soul is due to the unseen principle in the form of good and evil works, and has for its end the requital of those works. Your analogy would thus imply that the Lord also is under the influence of an unseen principle, and is requited for his good and evil works. The Lord cannot therefore be a ruler, finiteness or absence of omniscience, or here has the sense of and. If the Lord is under the influence of the Adrishta, it follows that, like the individual soul, he is subject to creation, dissolution, and so on, and that he is not omniscient. The Pasupati theory cannot therefore be accepted. It is true that the sutra, but in case of conflict it is not to be regarded, has already established the non-acceptability of all views contrary to the Veda. The present Adhikārana, however, raises this question again in order specially to declare that the Pasupati theory is contrary to the Veda. Although the Pasupata and the Saiva systems exhibit some features which are not altogether contrary to the Veda, yet they are unacceptable because they rest on an assumption contrary to the Veda, of the difference of the general, instrumental and material causes, and imply an erroneous interchange of higher and lower entities. Here terminates the Adhikārana of Pasupati. On account of the impossibility of origination, the sutras now proceed to refute a further doubt that the Pancaratra Tantra, which sets forth the means of attaining supreme beatitude, as declared by the Lord, may also be destitute of authority, in so far, namely, as belonging to the same class as the Tantras of Kapila and others. The above sutra raises the doubt. The theory of the Bhagavatas is that from Vasudeva, who is the highest Brahman and the highest cause, there originates the individual soul called Sankarshana, from Sankarshana the internal organ called Pradama, and from Pradama the principle of egoity called Anuruddha. Now this theory implies the origination of the individual soul, and this is contrary to scripture. For scriptural texts declare the soul to be without a beginning. The intelligent one is not born and does not die, and other texts. And there is not of the instrument from the agent. The internal organ called Pradama originates from Sankarshana, i.e. the internal organ originates from the individual soul which is the agent, but this is inadmissible, since the text from him there is produced breath, mind, and all sense organs declares that the mind also springs from none else but the highest Brahman. As the Bhagavata doctrine thus teaches things opposed to scripture, its authoritativeness cannot be admitted. Against these objections the next sutra declares itself, or, if they are of the nature of that which is knowledge and so on, there is no contradiction to that. Theo sets aside the view previously maintained. By that which is knowledge and so on we have to understand the highest Brahman. If Sankarshana, Pradama, and Anuruddha are of the nature of the highest Brahman, then truly there can be no objection to a body of doctrine which sets forth this relation. The criticism that the Bhagavatas teach an inadmissible origination of the individual soul, is made by people who do not understand that system. What it teaches is that the highest Brahman, there called Vasudeva, from kindness to those devoted to it, voluntarily abides in a fourfold form, so as to render itself accessible to its devotees. Thus it is said in the Pushkara Samhita, that which enjoins that Brahmanas have to worship, under its proper names, the fourfold nature of the self, that is the authoritative doctrine. That this worship of that which is of a fourfold nature means worship of the highest Brahman, called Vasudeva, is declared in the Sattvata Samhita. This is the supreme Sustra, the great Brahmopanishad, which imparts true discrimination to Brahma was worshipping the real Brahman under the name of Vasudeva. That highest Brahman, called Vasudeva, having for its body the complete aggregate of the 6 qualities, divides itself in so far as it is either the subtle, or division, or manifestation, and is attained in its fullness by the devotees who, according to their qualifications, do worship to it by means of works guided by knowledge. From the worship of the Vibhava aspect one attains to the Vyuha, and from the worship of the Vyuha one attains to the subtle called Vasudeva, the highest Brahman. Such is their doctrine. By the Vibhava we have to understand the aggregate of beings, such as Rama, Krishna, in whom the highest being becomes manifest. By the Vyuha the fourfold arrangement or division of the highest reality, as Vasudeva, Sankarsana, Pradama, and Aniruddha. By the subtle the highest Brahman itself, in so far as it has for its body the mere aggregate of the 6 qualities, as which it is called Vasudeva. Compare on this point the Pushkara, that body of doctrine through which, by means of works based on knowledge, one fully attains to the imperishable highest Brahman, called Vasudeva, and so on. Sankarsana, Pradama, and Aniruddha are thus mere bodily forms which the highest Brahman voluntarily assumes. Scripture already declares, not born he is born in many ways, and it is this birth, consisting in the voluntary assumption of bodily form, due to tenderness towards its devotees, which the Bhagavata system teaches. Hence there lies no valid objection to the authoritativeness of that system. And as Sankarsana, Pradama, and Aniruddha are the beings ruling over the individual souls, internal organs and organs of egoity, there can be no objection to their being themselves denoted by those latter terms. Individual soul, and so on. The case is analogous to that of Brahman being designated, in some texts, by terms such as ether, breath, and the like. And on account of contradiction, the origination of the Giva is, moreover, distinctly controverted in the books of the Bhagavatas also. Thus in the Paramasamhita the nature of Prakriti consists therein that she is non-sentient, for the sake of another, eternal, ever-changing, comprising within herself the 3 gunas, and constituting the sphere of action and experience for all agents. With her the soul is connected in the way of inseparable association. That soul is known to be truly without beginning and without end. And as all Samhitas make similar statements as to the eternity of the soul, the Pancaratra doctrine manifestly controverts the view of the essential nature of the Giva being something that originates. How it is possible that in the Veda as well as in common life the soul is spoken of as being born, dying, will be explained. The conclusion, therefore, is that the Bhagavata system also denies the origination of the soul, and that hence the objections raised on this ground against its authoritativeness are without any force. Another objection is raised by some. Sandilya, they argue, is said to have promulgated the Pancaratra doctrine because he did not find a sure basis for the highest welfare of man in the Veda and its auxiliary disciplines, and this implies that the Pancaratra is opposed to the Veda. His objection, we reply, springs from nothing else but the mere unreasoning faith of men who do not possess the faintest knowledge of the teachings of the Veda, and have never considered the hosts of arguments which confirm that teaching. When the Veda says, morning after morning those speak untruth who make the Agnihotra offering before sunrise, it is understood that the censure that passed on the offering before sunrise is really meant to glorify the offering after sunrise. We meet with a similar case in the Bhuma Vidya. There at the beginning Narada says, I know the Rig Veda, the Yajurveda, the Samaveda, the Atharvana as the fourth, the Itihasa Purana as the fifth, and so on, enumerating all the various branches of knowledge. And finally summing up with all this, I know the mantras only, I do not know the self. Now this declaration of the knowledge of the self not being attainable through any branch of knowledge except the knowledge of the Bhuman evidently has no other purpose but to glorify this latter knowledge, which is about to be expounded. Or else Narada's words refer to the fact that from the Veda and its auxiliary disciplines he had not obtained the knowledge of the highest reality. Analogous to this is the case of Sandilya's alleged objection to the Veda. That the Bhagavata doctrine is meant to facilitate the understanding of the sense of the Veda which by itself is difficult of comprehension, is declared in the Paramasamhita, I have read the Vedas at length, together with all the various auxiliary branches of knowledge. But in all these I cannot see a clear indication, raised above all doubt, of the way to blessedness, whereby I might reach perfection, and the wise Lord Hari, animated by kindness for those devoted to him, extracted the essential meaning of all the Vedanta texts and condensed it in an easy form. The incontrovertible fact then is as follows. The Lord who is known from the Vedanta texts, Vasudeva, called the highest Brahman, who is antagonistic to all evil, whose nature is of uniform excellence, who is an ocean, as it were, of unlimited exalted qualities, such as infinite intelligence, bliss, and so on, all whose purposes come true, perceiving that those devoted to him, according as they are differently placed in the four castes and theta stages of life, are intent on the different ends of life. Religious observances, wealth, pleasure, and final release, and recognizing that the Vedas, which teach the truth about his own nature, his glorious manifestations, the means of rendering him propitious and the fruits of such endeavor, are difficult to fathom by all beings other than himself, whether gods or men, since those Vedas are divided into Rik, Yagas, Saman, and Atharvan, and being animated by infinite pity, tenderness, and magnanimity, with a view to enable his devotees to grasp the true meaning of the Vedas, himself composed the Pancaratra Sastra, the author of the Sutras, who first composed the Sutras, the purport of which it is to set forth the arguments establishing the Vedanta doctrine, and then the Bharata Samhita in 100,000 slokas in order to support thereby the teaching of the Veda. Himself says in the chapter called Mokshadharma, which treats of knowledge, if a householder, or a brahmacharin, or a hermit, or a mendicant wishes to achieve success, what deity should he worship? And so on, explains then at great length the Pancaratra system, and then says, from the lengthy Bharata story, comprising 100,000 slokas, this body of doctrine has been extracted, with the churning stuff of mind, as butter is churned from curds, as butter from milk, as the Brahmana from men, as the Aranyaka from the Vedas, as Amrita from medicinal herbs. This great Upanishad, consistent with the four Vedas, in harmony with Sankhya and Yoga, was called by him by the name of Pancaratra. This is excellent. This is Brahman, this is supremely beneficial. Fully agreeing with the Rik, the Yagas, the Saman, and the Atharvangiras, this doctrine will be truly authoritative. The terms Sankhya and Yoga here denote the concentrated application of knowledge and of works, as has been said, by the application of knowledge on the part of the Sankhya, and of works on the part of the Yogins. And in the Bhishmaparvan we read, by Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaisyas and Sudras, Madhava is to be honored, served and worshipped, he who was proclaimed by Sankarshan in agreement with the Sattvata law. How then could these utterances of Vâdâyana, the foremost among all those who understand the teaching of the Veda, be reconciled with the view that in the sutras he maintains the non-authoritativeness of the Sattvata doctrine, the purport of which is to teach the worship of, and meditation on, Vasudeva, who is none other than the highest Brahman known from the Vedanta texts, but other passages in the Mahabharata, such as there is the Sankhya, the Yoga, the Pancaratra, the Vedas, and the Pasupata doctrine, do all these rest on one and the same basis, or on different ones? And so on, declare that the Sankhya and other doctrines also are worthy of regard, while yet in the Sariraka Sutras those very same doctrines are formally refuted. Why, therefore, should not the same hold good in the case of the Bhagavata doctrine? Not so, we reply. In the Mahabharata also Vâdâyana applies to the Sankhya and other doctrines the same style of reasoning as in the sutras. The question, asked in the passage quoted, means do the Sankhya, the Yoga, the Pasupata, and the Pancaratra set forth one and the same reality, or different ones? If the former, what is that reality? If the latter, they convey contradictory doctrines, and, as reality is not something which may be optionally assumed to be either such or such, one of those doctrines only can be acknowledged as authoritative, and the question then arises which is to be so acknowledged. The answer to the question is given in the passage beginning, "Know, O royal sage, all those different views." The promulgator of the Sankhya is Kapila. Here the human origin of the Sankhya, Yoga, and Pasupata is established on the ground of their having been produced by Kapila, Hiranyagarbha, and Pasupati. Next the clause Aparantatamas is said to be the teacher of the Vedas, intimates the non-human character of the Vedas, and finally the clause of the whole Pancaratra, Narayana himself is the promulgator, declares that Narayana himself revealed the Pancaratra doctrine. The connected purport of these different clauses is as follows: as the systems of human origin set forth doctrines mutually contradictory, and, moreover, teach what is in conflict with the matter known from the Veda, which, on account of its non-human character, is raised above all suspicion of error and other imperfections, they cannot be accepted as authoritative with regard to anything not depending on human action and choice. Now the matter to be known from the Veda is Narayana, who is none other than the highest Brahman. It hence follows that the entities set forth in those different systems, the Pradhana, the soul, Pasupati, and so on, have to be viewed as real only in so far as Narayana, the highest Brahman, as known from the Vedanta texts, constitutes their self. This the text directly declares in the passage. In all those doctrines it is seen, in accordance with tradition and reasoning, that the Lord Narayana is the only basis. This means, to him who considers the entities set forth in those systems with the help of argumentation, it is evident that Narayana alone is the basis of all those entities. In other words, as the entities set forth in those systems are not Brahman, anyone who remembers the teaching of texts such as all this indeed is Brahman. Narayana is all, which declare Brahman to be the self of all, comes to the conclusion that Narayana alone is the basis of those entities. As thus it is settled that the highest Brahman, as known from the Vedanta texts, or Narayana himself is the promulgator of the entire Pancaratra, and that this system teaches the nature of Narayana and the proper way of worshipping him. None can disestablish the view that in the Pancaratra all the other doctrines are comprised. For this reason the Mahabharata says, thus the Sankhya Yoga and the Veda and the Aranyaka, being members of one another, are called the Pancaratra. The Sankhya, the Yoga, the Vedas, and the Aranyakas, which are members of one another because they are one in so far as aiming at setting forth one truth, together are called the Pancaratra. The Sankhya explains the 25 principles, the Yoga teaches certain practices and means of mental concentration, and the Aranyakas teach that all the subordinate principles have their true self in Brahman, that the mental concentration enjoined in the Yoga is a mode of meditation on Brahman, and that the rites and works which are set forth in the Veda are means to win the favor of Brahman, thus giving instruction as to Brahman's nature. Now all these elements, in their inward connection, are clearly set forth in the Pancaratra by the highest Brahman, Narayana himself. The Sariraka Sastra does not disprove the principles assumed by the Sankhyas, but merely the view of their not having Brahman for their self, and similarly in its criticism on the Yoga and Pasupata systems, it merely refutes the view of the Lord being a mere instrumental cause, the erroneous assumptions as to the relative position of higher and lower entities, and certain practices not warranted by the Veda. But it does not reject the Yoga itself, nor again the Lord Pasupati. Hence Smriti says, the Sankhya, the Yoga, the Pancaratra, the Vedas, and the Supata doctrine, all these having their proof in the self may not be destroyed by arguments. The essential points in all these doctrines are to be adopted, not to be rejected absolutely as the teaching of Jina or Sugata is to be rejected. For, as said in the Smriti text quoted above, in all those doctrines it is seen, according to tradition and reasoning, that the Lord Narayana is the only basis. Here terminates the adhikarana of the impossibility of origination.